Hey guys, it's JL Phoenix, and today I'm going to be drawing a miniature illustration scene of my character Yuta. I got inspired to do this drawing after I saw another artist do something kinda similar to that. I wanted to use this as a way to get some insight into my character Yuta, as well as a little bit of her backstory, which I plan to do the same thing for each of the Tale of Ada Linda characters in the future. Without further ado, let's get started. So when concepting the miniature scene for Yuta, I decided to focus more on her personality and as well as certain aspects of her past, such as her previous profession prior to joining Ada and Raziel's party. I decided to just call it Ada and Raziel's party, being that technically Raziel isn't fully the leader, but Ada isn't fully the leader either. They're kind of both sharing the leader position, as both of them have their own separate groups that just came together, and then Yuta and Leto came in later on, and then Eaglin joined in between that time. So yeah, it's funny how it went, but hey, regardless, while also giving some insight into her hometown or village. So I sketched each version of each scene to represent different aspects of Yuta's personality, although I was having a hard time piecing together what I wanted the scene to look like. So during each of the concept sketches, I decided to just focus more on her posing opposed to just the background, because I figured I would come up with something as I go along or when I get to the final illustration. Now for the first concept, it was supposed to show a bit of her past, just a small glimpse of her past. So I had posed her in a way where we were looking from a top-down angle of her walking out of a room with her blades in hand or sickles in hand, and it was supposed to relate to her profession as a messenger in the village that she's from, which I had talked about in Torsten's video last time. But as a reminder, messengers are essentially the people in their village that not only send verbal messages, but also send other more severe messages for failures amongst the elites. Failure is not an option. Oh, and also letters as well. They send physical paper messages too. So, yeah, forgot to mention that part. At any rate, I was thinking about going with a concept that kind of showed that for the first idea. And now that I've finished the illustration already and I'm in the process of writing down the script, I had came up with another full-fledged idea of what I can do with this first concept, which I may or may not work on in the future, but it's an idea nonetheless. So I was picturing something like, we have, once again, the top-down view of Yuta, or rather the bird's eye view perspective of Yuta. It shows her walking forward, like we see her a little more closer towards the audience, but further back we see her shadow and it's like stretched out behind her. And I was maybe thinking like having the Order's crest, which the order she's a part of is the order that her brother or her foster brother Torsten is a part of, or her foster brother Torsten is in charge of, which I've talked about in Torsten's video, so feel free to look at that video to get a little bit more insight on that. But yeah, I was thinking like the shadow would cover up the symbol of the order, which would show kind of like how her past is a little, it's not something she's proud of. Essentially, it kind of casts like a long shadow on her life as she's not super proud of it. Like, she may have been good at her job, but it wasn't something she wanted to do, because in her village, they predetermine everyone's positions and jobs and stuff based on the skill sets that they see they have. And they're like, oh, you get to be a messenger, you get to be in charge of like a night order or something, it basically that's how it works in her village. And so with all of that, Yuta's kind of like, she's not, like I said, she's not very proud of it. So I had that intention of like showing that in the first scene, at least for the newest updated version of this concept. idea that I had. I have no idea if I'm actually going to draw this in the future, but if I do, you guys will see it. But that is essentially the idea that I had for, or the revised idea I have for Concept 1 that I just wanted to take the time to share with you guys. But let's move on to going back to the initial ideas of Concepts 1 through 4. So as for Concepts 2 through 4, I decided to focus more on her personality. Well, technically, all of the concepts were focused on her personality, but I was really narrowing it down by the time I got to Concepts 2 through 4, and I specifically picked poses for Yuta that I felt would best capture that. And there were a number of poses that flashed in my mind that I felt would have worked really well for Yuta, but I eventually settled on these 3 poses, as well as the first one for the concept, before I eventually came up with another pose that I felt would have fit best for Yuta for the final illustration. Now, during the process of me drawing this, I decided to start with the background first, especially since I didn't exactly have an idea for the background just yet. And then I later drew Yuta. That way it also helped with scaling too. Even though I knew the direction I wanted to take with Yuta's pose, I still made some adjustments and changes between sketches and up to the outline. Now, probably what I find a little funny as I was drawing Yuta was that the way how I did her head angle kind of reminded me of the Apollo statue head thing, which, as a side note, I had to actually draw that during my Drawing 2 class, and honestly, for some reason, I couldn't get his face right. But nonetheless, it still reminded me of that. I think it's just simply because the head angle I chose to pick. Who knows? At any rate, when I finally finalized her pose, I had wanted to do something that was a little more like dynamic, or rather that had a little more movement than what I originally intended. Because at first I was going for a more like dynamic walking kind of pose, which is what I'm calling it, but I eventually settled on a pose that had a little bit more movement to it. Now, outlining was pretty straightforward. There wasn't really anything that was like super big. Of course, during the outlining process, I did end up changing that pose one more time, which is where I eventually landed on the more dynamic one opposed to the, slightly less dynamic. So after I finished up with my concepts, I realized during the concepting process that I never actually figured out what the background was going to look like. So I went off to go find some inspiration to give me a general idea as to what I want the background to look like. I knew for a fact that I wanted it to be kinda on the fancy side, but not super fancy, but also still represent a bit of Yuta's hometown, or village. Now, where Yuta's from, they're not like a super wealthy village or anything like that, but they appear that way due to their more elaborate architecture. That, and they have just enough gold to make gilded trims and molds. Now, gilded is just another way of saying painted gold, which was also done back in ye old Renaissance era of art and the Baroque era of art, and as well as during the Rococo era of art. It was just a lot cheaper to do more gilded type of like structures and stuff, or do some more painted gold stuff than it was to make stuff out of gold. But that's just a little bit of art history lesson for you guys, and just to take something that I learned during my art history class and tell you guys, yeah. So, knowledge for you. Yeah. At any rate, not only were their trims and molds painted in gold or gilded, they also dyed certain fabrics in gold, which you can see this in Yuta's design as well as in Torsten's design, that they have some gold accents on their clothing. Now, this wasn't cheap being that they had very little gold resources, but they do have a lot of minerals. So that's one thing, which they do use that in their structures too. A lot of time they use it on like their flooring and stuff, which you actually get to see a little bit of that with this background that I'm designing for Yuta's miniature illustration. Now, when I got to coloring Yuta, I just reused the same colors for her hair and skin that I already had on her character sheet. And as far as for the parts of her clothing where it's just white and gold, they were pretty easy to remember. But for the rest of her outfit, I had to eyeball it, which I didn't get nearly as close as the original colors, as they were a little more washed out compared to the version that I have on here, where the colors are a bit brighter, but that's not too bad. Personally, I think the brighter colors are a little better than the more washed out version that I had with the original design. That's not saying both don't have their place. It's just, I think I will lean more towards the newer version than the older version, or maybe make a blend between both. Who knows? We'll see in the coming future. Also, I have finally decided to officially give Yuta freckles from here on. So for her next couple of designs, you'll start seeing her with freckles on her face. Yay! Personally, I think it looks really nice on her. Like, in the first time when I had designed Yuta, I recall I did say that if I wanted her to have freckles or not. That was one of the things that was like, I wasn't too sure about. So when I did the concept sheet and I did the two versions of her face, one with the freckles, one without freckles, and I was just like, honestly, I think the freckles add more to her personality. So I am going to be adding it from now on. Also, I do plan on doing a character design thing for Yuta. It's not going to be like a redesign, more like I guess it's more like a character exploration kind of thing, where I go and design her expression sheet, so we get to see all her different little expressions, or at least I get to experiment with her different expressions, and also do like a outfit design thing. I kind of did something like that during her character design sheet, but funny story, when I was doing that, I actually kind of ran out of steam and forgot over half of the different ideas that I had, so I was just like, look, we have these three and that's about it. So I do plan on doing like possibly either a full video on that or combine that video with like her expression sheet, so who knows. But regardless, I'm looking forward to doing that. Also, while I'm doing like the clothing design to like other possible clothing designs, I'm also thinking about doing different like little hairstyles for her as well, just to be like, oh yeah, this is a potential hairstyle she can wear, or like possibly even do like different type of curl patterns for her hair, because currently the curl pattern I have for her hair is like the big looser curls. I did have an idea of having her with like, you know, smaller curls, but I'll experiment with that in that little design video. Now on to rambling about the background and also simultaneously lore dumping at the same time. Yippee! The background that I had in mind was fairly simple and was a little less personal for Yuta, even though I did specifically pick out just a small sliver of a piece of the environment of her old childhood home that she herself doesn't necessarily claim to be home. So, a little backstory. Yuta and her adopted brother Torsten were both raised together by their stoic foster father, Warwick, who was one of their village's top generals before he retired. He wasn't super close with Yuta and Torsten, but he never disregarded them or their skills. In fact, he encouraged them to forge a path for themselves with their own skills. Yuta doesn't truly see Warwick as her father. As she states, he often felt more like a commander training his subordinates than a father raising his children. But she chalked it up to just his militaristic nature that has been ingrained in him since he was a child. But that doesn't mean he doesn't care at all, as Yuta does recall that he'd often check in on both her and her brother and listen to their concerns while doing his best to offer solutions. But he was terrible with comforting either of them when they were hurt. So yeah, father year, am I right? Well, at any rate, as I was finishing up with the rest of the background, I began thinking about some of the other miniature scenes I plan to do with some of the other characters. Well, at least after I finish redesigning them, especially Raziel. There always seems to be something wrong with his face! In all seriousness, as I finish redesigning them, I'll do their miniature scene illustrations with them. But unlike Yuta's, theirs will be way more personal, as the rest are not nearly as closed off about their past and personal interests as Yuta is. And here's the final result. Honestly, I really enjoyed drawing this. and also doing the concept sketches beforehand. And I also look forward to eventually drawing the rest of the characters in their own version of their miniature scene illustrations. But of course, I need to redesign them first. I was also shocked at the amount of lore that I also ended up sharing in this video too. Wasn't exactly planned, but I think it worked out. Anyways guys, that's gonna be all for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. What do you think about this miniature illustration scene so far? And do you also look forward to eventually seeing the rest of the characters being drawn in this, or shall I say the rest of the Tale of Adelinda characters being drawn in this similar manner? Also, what do you think about Yuta's story so far? I'd like to give a special shout out to my Patreon supporters Zeta787 and the Ocean Shock, and I would also like to welcome our newest Patreon supporter, AshCreative7. Thank you guys so much for the support, and thank you all for subscribing and being part of the Phoenix Bands. Have an amazing day, guys!